Yeah. So many
Last
ways.
night the band was really loud.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the problem.
Actually, it's funny because I went in there and I'm like, oh, this isn't that bad. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, guitar was playing, and then all of a sudden, like, all the horns came in, and it was like, oh yeah, I like knocked back. Wow.
And there is still.
Yeah, I don't think this is
Although, like,
about
where
that.
I am,
I think it's also because she's so busy, you know, if she knew that this was
Yeah, that's why we're just trying to get a feel of what I want.
I can tell you more later.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second of 3 AV talks today. I'll let the video stop with music in a second. There we go. So good afternoon, thanks for joining us. Thank you if you joined our earlier talk with Lana Turner, who gave a fantastic talk, part 2 of 3. She will be back tomorrow at noon for the third of her talks. She's going to be talking about some of these amazing clothes on my right, and we're looking for a model, so if anyone's a size 27 waist,
I am.
sold. Rachel Dahlenburg.
I'm a 32-27.
Oh, well then you would be definitely.
Looks like we've got a model. Perfect.
I need 2 models, 2 more.
All right, so we just need 2 more Rachels, and we'll be good to go. And we have another great talk coming in about an hour's time with Mickey Davidson talking about her time with Frankie Manning and Norma Miller. So please join us in about an hour for that. Right now you're stuck with me and my friend Jerry Almonte here on my left. We're going to be talking about dance photography, and we're going to take a little bit of a journey in talking about how we became photographers. Talk about maybe some of the shots that we took this weekend or previous weekends. We'll probably have to mess with the lights a little bit up and down. We'll figure that out. And I'm going to try to drive a mouse from across the room. We'll see how that goes. I might be getting up and back and running back and forth while Jerry talks to go see what's over there. But this is really kind of an informal thing. I'm kind of an informal photographer. Jerry's actually a little bit more of a formal photographer than I am, but we don't get paid. So that actually leads into kind of how I wanted to start off. And like I said, this is Jerry Almonte. Please welcome Jerry Almonte. My name is Ryan Swift. I am the coordinator for the LED Talks and one of the photographers here this weekend. I'm not a professional photographer. Jerry is not a professional photographer. We are not trained in any real, kind of way. So kind of what I wanted to talk about is talking about dance photography kind of from an amateur perspective, as 2 people that I think have figured out a way to make it work for us, and we have very different approaches, but I'm trying to make it accessible to folks that just want to take pictures. I mean, everybody's got an awesome camera now. Anyone could be a photographer. I think anyone could be a professional photographer. I think there's a very big gap between me and people that do this for a living. They're trained, they're technical, they're professional, they have a level of quality that I will never have the time to dedicate to get that far. But that doesn't mean you can't take great pictures and have a good time doing it. So that's kind of how I wanted to approach this conversation and talk to Jerry about that too, because I have, as I've watched Jerry over the last couple of years, I've been really impressed with your growth as a photographer from someone that was just basically kind of running around shooting from the hip to being someone that's putting together some really, really impressive stuff. So I'm going to pick your brain a little bit while we're doing this. You've got your own microphone. You don't need me to. I will make Jerry talk. No, we're not going to see some of the photographs first. We're gonna talk about some of our things, and then we're going to get to the photographs. So the first thing I just was going to talk about briefly is a question that I get very frequently, and I actually think it's not the most important question to ask someone that's been taking pictures, and I think any established photographer will know this. I kind of want to just get it out of the way as quickly as possible, and it's, what kind of camera do you use? A lot of the time it's this. Sometimes it's this big heavy thing. So since people ask, and I don't think it's an important part of the conversation, but it is part of the conversation, I figure I would just get out of the way and I would see what Jerry's using. I've got a Canon 60, it's a DSLR, it's a mid-range SLR camera. Canon. Very happy with it. I shoot generally with a 24 to 105 millimeter. It's kind of standard kit lens. I don't have a lot of expensive gear. I mean, I should take it back. 60 is not cheap. But like, I don't have multi-$1,000 lenses. I don't have big telephoto, anything. I don't have tons of expensive glass. I'll either shoot with this kit lens or the 50 millimeter, and very rarely I will pull out this telephoto that I got on sale at Best Buy, half off because it was used and they were clothing. So this is what I've used. I've had this camera for a couple years. Before that, I had a very entry-level SLR that I was shooting at ILHC for the years up before 2 years ago. And I think I've gotten some good shots. Obviously, tech is good, and more expensive is generally gives you a lot more options, but that doesn't mean that it's going to solve all your problems, and that just because you have a 5D or a $9,000 camera, you're not going to suddenly be a good photographer. So that's why I think it's not super important, but one that people ask about. So Jerry, I'm curious what you use. I think you're on the Sony. Is that what you're using now?
Yeah, that's correct. I just got, well, not just, about a year ago, I got the Sony A9, which is very high-end. And it came with, no, it did not come with, and shoot with a 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8 lens. That did not come with it. I bought the camera and the lens separately. And that's the lens I use mostly. And then I also have an 85 millimeter I use mostly for portraits, headshots, that sort of thing. Before that, I started out with a Lumix camera, Panasonic Lumix. It's a mirrorless camera, smaller sensor size. It's basically what you need to know. That was about 2012. Started with the GH2, then graduated to GH4 a few years later. And then I did accumulate like a lot of cameras in a short period of time. Now that you made me like sit here and...
I should have had you just line them all up across the front. So.
I mean, I don't use the other. Well, I use the. I still use the GH4 because it's completely weatherproof, and sometimes I need that. But for the most part, I've moved on to. I like the Sony, mostly because it's fast. It does like Ryan says. There's a lot of having a nice camera doesn't make you the best photographer. It does make things a lot easier sometimes, though. Shooting in low light. It's also very fast, and what are very important things when you're trying to capture people running around in the dark.
Yeah, I always like to say that when people ask about what I shoot, and I'm going to talk to Jerry about some of his portraiture and other stuff, but when you're shooting at a Lindy Hop event, it's really kind of the worst of every possible photo thing that you ever want to not encounter. It's low light, it's fast movement, you're far away, the lighting is weird, it's the same ballroom no matter where you go. People are wearing kind of wacky things. They don't, I've seen a lot of everybody wearing black this year, which is great when you're shooting against like a stage that's got the black on the bottom or the wall that's black. So I've got a lot of floating heads and hands. No one really dresses for photographers, which is frustrating, but it's really kind of the most insurmountable, terrible way that you want to be able to shoot anything. If there's any kind of negative thing, we've got it here at these Lindy Hop events. So it's a challenge, and it makes, I think I've seen this in your work too. It makes you have to get a little bit creative about how you're going to take some shots and what you want to do. So yeah, I don't recommend it to anybody, is basically what I'm saying.
Pictures of flowers.
Yeah, nature is nice, architecture is beautiful,
Doesn't go anywhere.
people posing is good. Yeah, anything but Lindy Hop.
And Lindy Hop is like the fastest dance you can try to like photograph on.
Yeah.
Compared to like tango or blues dance or whatever.
It's the fastest.
Dresses with color photos.
Bright colors are nice. Yeah, white shirts are generally okay, but if you've got like a nice yellow or bright blue, that's gonna pop and it's gonna look good. We'll probably see that a little bit later. So yeah, it is challenging. But I actually wonder, maybe that's a great segue, Jerry, into kind of discussing the type of photographer that I perceive you to be. and I don't know how you necessarily consider yourself, but when I tend to shoot, I can't shoot portraits. I can't shoot posed anything. I can't light for anything. I can barely use the flash that's in my bag. It's just a speed light that I stick on the top and I try to bounce it wherever. I'm no good with that. I'm more of a kind of a street photographer. I do a lot of travel photography, kind of found things, and I try to catch it in my travels. Same thing with people. I live in New York, so if I go to something like the Mermaid Parade, if New Yorkers have heard about it, there's a lot going on, but there's not a lot of there is a lot of posing, but I kind of try to capture things in the moment. I like to try to blend in, and I try to be a fly on the wall and capture things naturally. But I think you're kind of a little bit of the opposite in a lot of ways. What I've been seeing with your street dancer project, yeah. That's a controlled dance environment.
In a sense, I'm able to control certain circumstances, but it's still, I apply a lot of the same principles to the way I photograph a street dancer project. So let me just go back up just a little bit. So when I started doing photography, it was mostly doing again this the worst possible set of circumstances. Just sitting in a corner at a dance and just trying to capture people dancing or running around in the dark. And for some reason, well, after a while, you try to you're looking at, we're both sort of self-taught, so I have a look on Instagram, you kind of follow a bunch of people, see who's kind of interesting, who's sort of what inspires you, and there's a lot of dance photographers out there, and the vast majority of them, they work with ballet dancers, which is, if you've done ballet or follow ballet, I mean, they're magnificent, athletic, graceful, like the best combination of physical attributes that you can work with in a person. So even a mediocre photographer can get a pretty good photo with a well-trained ballet dancer. But I wanted to transfer what I captured at dances to how I captured what I saw at dances, which is a little bit of similar to you. Like you see some people just getting into a dance, and that's there's the great lines and the angles, but the emotion is really the emotion, especially between partner dances, the way people connect. I've always found that very interesting to try to put together. And then part of that is kind of led into just general portraiture. I was really got into this I'm following this let's backward path into photography. It's let's start with the hardest, weirdest thing, and now I'm trying to get into let's just do headshots where you just stand there and look like you should be hired, sort of thing. I feel like a lot of people just kind of come around the other way. It seems like. But when I'm at dances, I got a lot of my experience working at events like this, being a part of events. So a lot of it's kind of a little bit more street photographer, documentary, and just kind of walking around and seeing, oh, this is an interesting moment. I'll tell this story, which I've always think about in terms of what I like to capture, what kind of inspires me. I was at an event about 10 years ago. It was the World Lindy Hop Championships, 2005 or whatever. They had one of the first times all these dancers from all over the world came in and competed. And they announced the winners. Everyone was happy. It was great. But at some point, one of the judges there, after the event was over, everyone's looking at the score sheets like they do. One of the judges looked at the scoring sheets and figured out, wait a minute, this isn't adding up. This is not correct. The way the placements were announced. So they go back. Sylvia Sykes does everything by hand and in her head. She's kind of yeah, you're right, and she figures it all out. And they go through a few rounds and try to correct the math. So until finally they come up with the final place. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. It's not, there's no more big ceremony, there's no big crowd, there's just kind of people hanging out with the after party, they're just kind of chasing people down, saying like, oh, by the way, you came in first, or by the way, this, that, and the other thing. But I saw this one guy, the guy who came in from Belgium. He doesn't dance anymore, so we don't have to worry about that. He had initially come in third place at this event. First place in the World Championships of Lindy Hop. He was super hyped at the end when that happened, but when they finally figured out all the math, like he had come in last. He was dead last. And I was walking down the hallway from the late night, and I saw him just like sitting in the middle of the hallway. He was just alone and in the dark. And he just had his head down. It was just like he was utterly devastated. And I thought to myself, if at that point I had not started taking photography, like there were no cell phones. Well, there were cell phones, but there's like no way to take a picture with this. At that time, I thought to myself, hey, this actually would make a great photo. Like he was just kind of like backlit, completely dejected. And I always thought about that's the sort of thing that I find interesting to photograph. But the thing that I've now that I've done this for a few years, I wonder to myself, if I ran into that situation again, would I take that picture? I'm not sure I would. And that's the kind of thing I would like to capture, but knowing everyone a little bit more intimately these days, I'm not sure I actually would take out my camera and do that.
Yeah, I might take it and then decide later if I ever want to distribute the photo.
There's that.
I've done that too.
Yeah, there is that compunction, like,
yeah,
let's take it now and we'll figure it out later.
Yeah, but that's actually, it's a great segue into just your approach here at ILHC, which is a little bit different than the approach that I have at ILHC. But I think we both fill very specific roles when we're shooting at ILHC. And that wasn't by design. I don't think either of us have ever really been asked to be a photographer at ILHC, which is kind of hilarious, but we just show up with our cameras and like all of a sudden I've got a spot for me by the judges, and Jerry's walking around behind the scenes and he's got all access, and it's kind of just tailored to our interests. But when I'm shooting at ILHC, I generally, now after 11 years, I find I've got a spot by the judges where I'm looking head on at what's going on. And I know there are other photographers here doing perhaps more creative things with their photography. They're trying to do more creative shots, they're trying to find different angles and stuff like that. So one of the things that I look at as a photographer in official capacity or unofficial capacity is trying to provide coverage that other photographers aren't providing, whether that's by design or accidentally. So when I'm in the front and I've got this is another piece of gear that I have, by the way, this is my monopod that has saved my back over the last several years, because 36 couples of going like this is just like brutal. So this thing has been really nice. But when I'm sitting in the front, I'm not looking at myself as necessarily a creative, artistic photographer. I'm looking at myself as more of a documentarian. I'm trying to provide coverage for these couples or these performers or these dancers that are out there that would love a shot to just remember this event by. So I try to get at least one shot of every couple if I can. And it's not always, if I'm taking chances with zooming in real tight or running around like a crazy person trying to figure out the most ridiculous angle, I might miss something like that. So sometimes I try to just put a different hat on and maybe put a little bit of ego aside to try to provide coverage for the folks that are here working their butts off. And if it's a solid shot, I try to make it the best that I can, but I keep that in mind. The move of having the projector on the left wall now has added a little bit of extra incentive for me to move a little bit away from the front, get some really nice shots from the side, like I think we've got up here. I'll turn the lights down later, which is why I don't want to do the photos now. But I'm really looking at myself as a documentarian in a lot of times that I'm at dance events. But Jerry, on the other hand, who up until this year has had 1.5 million other responsibilities here at ILHC, you've been you've had the opportunity to experiment and explore as a photographer here at ILHC and pursue kind of the shots that other people never get to see. Was that something that you were looking for specifically, or did that just kind of happen?
Not specifically, just kind of sort of happened because I have I kind of take the same sort of attitude towards photography. I try to do with dance, not as successful with my dancing, but kind of see well, first off, I start off kind of the same way as you, just kind of what is it being covered as, would just be kind of interesting to remember. I have a degree in history, I love looking at historical photographs, and that moment before, something important happened, or while it happened, or even a little bit after. Those are all really interesting things to me. So that's where I started, but then, as there are other photographers around, or in general, I'm trying to find, I don't like getting the same shots as other people. We did this thing the first night on Thursday, where Ryan usually is up front, and I decided to go over to the side, take some photos, and then when he was tired, he decided to go over to the side, and not that he asked me to, or I felt intruded. Once I figured out that he was taking those photos off to the side, maybe I'm just going to move up to the front, or find a different angle. Try to do things a little bit differently. And then over the years, because I work the event, so I have to be at certain places at certain times. So if you look at my photos, they're always, for the past several years, they're from the same perspective for the most part, because I have to be there to answer questions or to hustle the event over into the next section. But I get tired of that. So I try to do something a little bit different, use a different lens, or maybe I'm just going to sit down on the ground, or spending a lot of time on the stage, shooting out in over and through the competitors and into the audience. It's just because I get tired of the same shots, but also sometimes you just get it's different dancers, it's a different situation. Trying to find something different each time. I'm not necessarily I don't like seeing the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's hard to not take the same picture year after year with the same ILHC banner in the background and the same band in the background and the same costumes or the same vintage outfits that people are wearing every year. The same ballroom. Yeah.
But at the same time, I also recognize that certain it's nice if those people have a photo of themselves at that moment. Maybe I'm tired of taking that photo, but maybe that couple's never been there before, and they would not. Maybe they might never see that photo, or they might not see it for decades from now. But for some, there's a part of me that thinks it'd be kind of interesting for them at least to have that moment, even if I'm kind of bored with it. But
they've never done that routine before.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. I'm going to jump to some of our favorite photos, or some photos that we'd like to talk about, and maybe I'll have to dim the lights, and I know it's going to be hard for the video, but and I may or may not have to run over there depending on how this goes with this wireless mouse. Not just yet. Give me a second, I'll let you know. But I did want to just talk to Jerry very briefly, maybe not so briefly, but I do want to hear what your experience has been like doing your street dancer project and your Dapper Lady project, and what inspired you to pursue both of those, and how that's maybe helped you develop as a photographer, because I've seen, like I said, a lot of amazing progress over the last couple of years in your photography.
Well, with the street dancer project, I thought it was, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of photos of dancers out there, but it's a very specific kind of dance. So I've been I started off with Lindy because that's and I know a lot of very talented dancers both locally and when I run into events. So I started off with them, but also trying to branch out to other different kinds of dances like tango and salsa and house and all these kind of dances that I feel like are underrepresented just out there in general. And I mean, part of it is I mean, part of it is part of the documentarian sort of impulse. Part of it's just trying to like figure out my mission statement, which I don't think I've really articulated for this thing. It's one of those things where like the dad-related project, I'm gonna like jump about, started off as one of those. We're self-taught. I'm self-taught. And there's you read a lot of blogs or watch a lot of videos about how to improve your photography, and they say, well, take up a photography project, 365 days of different photos, or take a picture of your kids like every day or something like that. And that related project turned into one of those I would like to take interesting portraits of people and just kind of it's interesting just to that a lot of people suggested a theme is kind of to help tie everything together, will help you focus, which it does. Women dressing up in suits is like a thing that was not very. I did a couple quick Google searches and there's not a lot of this around. So I'm in the Lindy. Again, this is part of being part of Lindy Hop scene. A lot of people dress in vintage, and a lot of women have this sort of thing. So yeah, why not? And that gives me an avenue to practice posing, maybe a little bit of lighting, maybe a little bit of social experimenting of how women present themselves when they're dressed up in dresses versus how they're dressed in a more masculine way. But those sort of things kind of happened after the fact. It was just kind of, this is a theme, I should go with it. And that's basically where the Street Dancer Project came from. I only knew Lindy Hoppers to begin with, so I worked with them, and then once again I decided I should do something different. I should work with different kinds of people, photograph them differently. It's just one of those impulses to do. I'm doing a particular thing. Okay, now I'm tired of it. What's the next twist? What's the next iteration of this that I can do? Different kinds of dances, different angles, different sort of perspectives, that sort of thing.
Great. So, go ahead, Ryan.
I want to know if I can make just one statement, Jerry. In terms of the street photos that I've seen, I think of you as the sort of Annie Leibovitz of dance photography, because you managed to capture the soul of the dance and the soul of the person, and it's brilliant. It's not just a moment in time. You really do capture that. I don't know how you do that.
Please explain how you do that, Jerry.
No, we're just
3 easy steps.
Well,
You just need a really good camera. I mean, that's all it really is.
Yeah,
Yeah, 78, now you're done.
yeah, pretty much. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think part of it is part of the reason why I still like being involved in the Lindy Hop community. It gives me the opportunity to work with a lot of interesting and creative people. And I could frame a photo and I could give some instructions about where the light is and all that. But those photos are those dancers. Some of them will come up, a lot of times they will come up with something that, I have known nothing about tango. And then, so I asked 2 tango dancers to do something, and they were like, oh, we'll do this freakish back bend, sort of bow, flip thing. And I'm like, great. Move over there a little bit. That's my part. I'll click. Done. But it is I do enjoy working with a lot of really interesting and creative people. And that's kind of how it allows me to, that's an avenue that allows me to do that.
Cool. So the next thing that I wanted to just maybe show is some of the photos of some of the favorites that we've taken over the last couple of years, and maybe just talk about why I've selected those, and why Jerry's selected those, and maybe see what the common thread is through some of those favorite photographs that I've taken. And then if we've got time, we can talk a little bit about our process, but I do want to let people ask questions too. So if we could turn the lights down.
Will these be available through anything or not necessarily?
All the photos that I'm going to talk about are published and have been published over the years. I'll put together a little album. Yes, all of them. I'm not going to show my outtakes. I didn't have a chance to do that, and I was going to show the photos that I never show, and I just didn't have an opportunity to do that. So maybe next year we'll have the
ILHC uncensored.
yeah. But part of the process is selecting a photo and how you do that. So this is one that I took yesterday, and I just wanted to maybe just compare. I published this to Facebook and Instagram. This one right here.
That's great.
So that's Joshua and Dee yesterday, killing it in the Open Classic. And to Jerry's point, I mean that's just them, right? Like that's their facial expression, that's their body movement, those are their lines. I'm just there for it, and I happen to push the shutter down. And we're very lucky in that regard. But part of the process, and I'm sorry, can I just ask you to move one seat over? So, okay, good, thanks. Part of our process is picking the right shot, and if I look at this one over here, if I can click on it. Yeah. So this was right before, and it's the same dancers, but there's nothing there. There's nothing really there to focus on. There's nothing there to really see what's going on. And I think a lot of the process for me is being selective. That's where those outtakes came in. I do take a lot of shots, and when folks are moving very quickly and it's unpredictable, that's the other thing we didn't talk about, is you don't necessarily know if they're going to go left or right or up or down. In addition to it being dark and fast and far away and monochromatic, there's also the unpredictability of it. So I do take a lot of shots. I don't know how many shots you burn through in a weekend, but I'm in the several thousand per day. It's time consuming. That's why my ILHC photos from 2017 aren't all published yet. The other reason is because I actually have a day job that takes a ton of time away from me being able to go through photography. But
Can we go over numbers?
Of photos, or how many hours I worked at my day job this week?
Well, there's that. No idea that. But
How many photos did you take last year?
It was 20,000.
20, all right.
Wow.
That makes me feel good because I only took about 12,000.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Do you use continuous shooting, or do you look for the moments, like hold the shutter down?
So I don't take video and select frames, but what I do is it's a little bit of both, and you can talk about this too. So yeah, so I think one of the advantages that I think we both have is that we're both dancers, and we've been dancing for a very long time, and we've been dancing Lindy Hop for a very long time. So I think one thing that I think I can do intuitively, and I think I've seen you do intuitively as well, is you can hear when a break is coming in the music. You can hear when that phrase is going to change. You know that very frequently folks will put together 3 swing outs and something. So you can kind of predict a little bit and take away some of that uncertainty. And if I see, and the other thing that I think I can see, and feel free to jump in, is as a dancer, you can see when folks are prepping their bodies for something. You can see if there's an aerial coming up, not always, but you can see folks setting themselves in a way that you're like, all right, something's gonna happen here. And then I'll hold that shutter down and I'll take a dozen shots, and I'll find that one, Goldilocks shot in the middle, but there is a certain amount of predicting there, and I find it, very similar to like a sports photographer. You know when a pitcher's winding up. You know when a guy's going to swing the bat. You don't need to hold the shutter down for the entire pitch to get that shot. You can see when a guy's going to slide into second, and I think there's a certain amount of that there, and I think we do have an advantage as dancers to be able to see that coming. I don't know if you've got any.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've gone back and forth where, I used to use a not very capable camera, so I had to train myself to take a single shot at a time. But we have that experience as dancers. When people are in open position and swing out, that's much more interesting than when they're in the closed position. But sometimes, something big is coming up, or maybe an important moment like that, at the right before everyone swings out and you all skate. You find a spot and then just hold it down like a machine gun and hope you can get something.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, and we'll get to this too, is one of the reasons why I picked this shot over, for example, this shot, or sorry, even this shot's even better, is her lines are beautiful here. The dress with her knee is super cool, but I can't see their faces here. I don't know what kind of experience they're having. And Jerry's done a phenomenal job of this. We'll get to that too. But I think the thing that makes this photo so special is the look on their faces. You can see what kind of experience they're having. And that, for me, I'll go through some of the other photos that I was going to pull up. And I don't know that I was necessarily conscious of this as I was going through and picking these. But that's Jerry's. We're going to get to that in a second. It's beautiful. But I'm going to turn my chair around just a little bit while I navigate. So as I was just going through some of my favorite ILHC pictures, the ones that I found myself gravitating to are not even necessarily the most interesting sections of a dance. They're not the most interesting move that you're capturing. And very frequently, the most amazing aerials that I'm seeing look like garbage in a camera because bodies are contorted and they're spinning and they're awkward and
They're also freaking out at that moment.
Yeah, there's a lot of looks of panic. But something like this of Tasha and Sammy, seeing the kind of experience they're having, for me, that's what makes this photo special to me. And if I'm going to go through some of the other ones, let's see if I can do this from this angle. Where am I? Here. So here's another one. This is from 2015. Yes, it's super cool, the moves that they're doing. And again, these are two dancers at the top of their game, and their bodies are exactly where they want them to be. But the thing that makes it for me is like this look on Joe's face, and this look on Peter's face is just like, oh my God, I've got a tiger by the tail here, which if you've ever danced with Joe Hoffberg is probably a very accurate representation of what's going on. But the other thing I like about this photo is you've got a lot of these pros in this invite in the back. And I think this is Laura on the left who's clapping along. I can't tell from this angle, and Sky on the right. Their enjoyment of what's going on as well, for me, adds to the photo. And as I continue to go through some of these other photos, this is Ramona and Nala from 2014. This is not the most interesting move that they did in this jam circle. They were killing it. But the look of enjoyment on Nala's face and the look of how into it Ramona is, for me, makes this shot. The lines are there. The crowd is obviously into it. But as I was going through some of my favorites that I've taken over the years, it's really that's kind of what I gravitated to the most. And like Jerry said, it's the dancers, so I don't have to worry about necessarily where Ramona's going to be putting her hands and feet or where Nala's going to be putting his hands and feet. Like, they're the best at what they do. So, of course their lines are going to be beautiful and their bodies are going to be fantastically positioned, but being able to convey or capture the experience that these folks are having as dancers has been one of the things that I've really enjoyed. And as a dancer, I can really relate to maybe not the ability of their dancing, but the experience that they're going through of enjoying a great partner dance and being part of a community and being part of the music that's going on. That was behind me in this shot. That for me has been a lot of what I've really kind of been drawn to. So those are just a couple, and I did want to talk about this one in a second. And this was another one from last year. Kenny and Delilah. I don't think I've got time to go through, but part of what I was going to go through here is the shots that didn't make the cut as part of my process. And this is an aerial where they caught their breath for a second, and again, the lines of their bodies are beautiful. But for me, the look on Kenny and Delilah's faces is really telling the story of this entire dance. And there are other shots that their bodies are doing ridiculously amazing things, but you can't see their faces. You can't see what kind of experience they're having. And that's been kind of the through line for me. So that was just one thing I wanted to just touch on real quick while we were going through. Oh, hey, there's Jerry right there, speaking of portraiture. I took that for our podcast together. So the last thing I just wanted to talk about, and I wanted to transition this over to Jerry, is I caught this one last year. And it's actually, it's not really a great shot as far as clarity is concerned. She's a little blurry. My shutter speed was probably a couple clicks slower than it should have been. But the expression on her face, which you can see here, makes it for me, in addition to everything else. This for me was just a very lucky shot. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the thing that I also found very interesting about this, and they were using this for the website this year, which was very flattering, but Jerry caught the same moment from a very different perspective. And actually, someone's leg was very conveniently blocking me from the shot, which I really appreciate.
I'm behind the competitors at that point.
Yeah. So this is a very different perspective, and I think it kind of just goes to show kind of my opportunity of being in the front and seeing things from a certain point of view, and Jerry seeing the same thing from a very different point of view and a very different perspective makes a very different kind of shot. So I don't know if you want to talk about this at all, Jerry, or what you like or don't like about this, but I think it's a great shot also, but for very different reasons.
Well, I selected this shot mostly because your shot went up first, and I knew I had this shot in there at the same time. But you know, it is kind of this wild, crazy, like just doing this figure four with her legs. I don't understand what's going on there. But it's one of those just kind of like snippets, like slice of life of ILHC. But going back to a point that you were making before, like one of the reasons why I like shooting from this perspective is because we get more of the crowd reactions. Out of all those thousands of photos that I take from the front, like the vast majority of them are not interesting at all. Because a lot of times, the audience is kind of sitting on their hands. It's cold in there. They're kind of like, it really something's got to be cooking.
You're on top of 30.
Yeah, something's got to be cooking out there for people to start like really getting into it. But when they do, it adds like so much to the overall feeling of the photo. I love, those are my favorite photos. Just getting like the crowd reaction. Everyone's kind of screaming and getting into it, pointing at the dancer. There's some people here at ILHC, I hope they always show up because like they're very expressive. And I hope they sit up front, and I hope they're always like. Well,
We got to put some plants in the audience, is what you're saying?
Probably should.
Curated audience.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely speak for themselves, but they're definitely active
participants.
Yeah, active spectators.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the shots that was a good transition. Jerry, I don't know if there are any particular that you wanted to talk about that you showed me.
Well, going back to that, the crowd.
Sorry.
Going back to the crowd reactions. Go to the second from the bottom row, the third one.
This right?
Yeah. This is from, I believe. Yeah. This is from the Open Strictly last year. This is the couple that ended up winning, and like the crowd is going nuts. The entire the funny part is like this is like all the dancers because they wound up. They repeated a sequence. I went back and looked at the video. They did the same thing over and over again, which is why the entire crowd just kind of like got pumped in. They were locked into these kids, and they aren't kids. They're the junior couple from one of the junior couples from Sweden. Everyone was locked into them, and they repeated the sequence really very quickly, and that kind of the crowd drew the crowd in. That's why everyone's jumping up at the same time as they are. But it's like those are the kind of shots I really enjoy. Everyone's reacting, and Leonard almost smiles, which is kind of so
That's like Bigfoot. You got Bigfoot on camera there.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's a great shot. I love that. Any others you wanted to touch on real quick?
We'll go back all the way up to the top. There's
on the top.
It is. Oh, there. I know what happened. Oh, same row, next to the last one.
This one right here?
Yeah. They're not all. I didn't. When you here's a tip, folks. When you're taking photos, try to decide on a way. I don't know how you call it, how you name your files consistently, because my files were not.
Organization is important.
Yeah. You want to put your year first, your event first, whatever. Just figure it out, because if you don't stick with it, it gets really confusing when you upload it later. This is from, I think, 2013, 2014, and it's one of those kind of like, again, slice of life sort of ILHC. And we used to, in the old hotel, we used to cram everyone into this hallway. We used to call it competition competitors alley. This is the cattle call for probably the open draw. Jackie Jill at the time. And I know Caitlin, and for some reason she decided to just stare down at my camera as I was taking, just kind of like, my intention was just to take a photo of like all these people jammed into this hallway. But Caitlin is also, she knows me and also very aware of her surroundings, so she kind of like just kind of stared down the camera while I did that. And it ended up being a really interesting composition with like no one else is kind of looking in the same direction, but I kind of enjoyed this one.
So that one's not posed.
No, it's not. It's like one of those things where, again, working with a lot of creative people who that kind of know what they're doing, or are aware of what their surroundings are. And it also helps that we know each other. So she gave that a little bit, something a little bit more interesting.
Awesome, I dig that.
Oh yeah, we were talking about expressions and not expressions, but on the second row, on the fourth one,
this one right here?
next one to the left.
Four, I can count.
Yeah. We're talking about, again, this is Nala, this is a wife. This is them, obviously, not facing. I do enjoy really interesting, cool expressions of people, but these are dancers too, and sometimes it's just the body language that really gets, really comes through. Another reason why I like the Street Dancer Project, people just are able to convey things with their body. I have no idea where this is. This is like maybe a Strictly or something, but it's like, and we have the lights up, and Nala just kind of glances down at his wife, and I don't know, their arms are intertwined, and it's a thing. I really enjoy it. But those are like, again, just this is what comes from like being in the right place, right time, but also taking a lot of photos. Because I'm very certain I took probably a few photos before and after this, which were not nearly as interesting as this, at least to me.
All right, let's hit one more, and then I want to ask you about how you go through, and then we're gonna open it up for questions because we're almost out of time. You got one last one you wanna look at?
Well, another again. Third row. Oh, wait a minute. Well, we'll do.
We can do two if you need to.
Okay, well, third row, fifth, the black and white one.
This one right here.
Yeah. So part of taking, like any kind of street photography, documentary photography, is just kind of like identifying. Sometimes you're just like walking around and you look and you notice something kind of interesting. Just have very fast reflexes on how to react to that. This is the corner during one of the draw finals. During the finals, our lighting person decided to shoot a light straight down into the entranceway, which is to the right, and didn't move it. So that's why everyone else is in the darkness. So you take one step back. If Natalia takes one step back, she's in the darkness. But for some reason, she just happened to be standing there. And I was walking by, and I'm like, she's wearing like mostly white, like very bright colors, and just kind of snapped that one right off. It's that tension as she's kind of watching the rest of the final unfold. But yeah, taking a lot of photos, being in the right place, right time, identifying the circumstances, and just kind of taking that opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great shot. Did you have one more?
I just had this funny one because we were talking. I thought we were going to do photos that we don't usually post.
The outtakes? Yeah, I didn't get to that, unfortunately. Yeah,
I'll do
but you've got one. You did your homework.
Yeah.
Where are we looking?
Go back up, scroll up. first row, fifth, next to the black and white.
This one right here.
And it's like, this is just a random moment. She's just spinning around. He just happened to be, for some reason, his head was down there. Again, right place, right time.
Or
I never-
wrong place, wrong time for certain individuals, maybe.
I never posted this. I did send it to both of them. They laughed about it.
Yeah.
Kind of fun.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, one great point too is there's a lot of photos that maybe artistically or aesthetically appealing for a lot of reasons, but maybe practically speaking, because we know and like all of these people, we don't want to put the picture up that looks super cool, but they've got a terrible expression on their face, or or they've got a short skirt and they're probably showing something that doesn't want to be published to the entire internet. So I think
even if they're doing something super cool.
Super cool. I mean, there's been a bunch of shots that I've had over the years that have been amazing captures that just aren't going to go out to the world because it's just not the most flattering for someone. So I think being selective and being particular about the photos that you shoot, both from just being kind, but also if you put up 10 of your best shots as opposed to 30 shots that have 10 really good ones, that can make you maybe seem like a better photographer than you really are.
So no one's going to look at all 30 of them.
And no one's going to look at all 30 or 3,000 or 20,000. They're not going to click through all of those. So I think being selective and particular about what you post is part of the reason why it takes me so long to go through all my photos. I'm not just doing a dump. I think it's why it takes you so long to go through it as well. But I think it's an important part of the process.
Yeah, I think I posted like maybe 600 photos out of those 20,000.
Yeah, I usually average about 150 a day at ILHC is what I wind up posting. And the other thing, I try to get coverage, like we were talking about earlier, to bring it back. Try to get at least one per couple if I can of the things that I'm covering. So sometimes I'll maybe put something up that I would have been maybe a little bit more selective about, but I'm trying to do a service to the event, do a service to the competitors. So it is a balance, I think.
Although there are times where you do have to make that choice between no photo and terrible photo.
I'll go no photo.
Yeah, I have gone no photo.
No photo.
There have been times, and I've actually mentioned this to you, this weekend where I just stopped taking photos of some people because it was just not going to happen for them.
And sometimes it's just where you are in the room as well, right? It's got nothing to do necessarily with how they're dancing, because there could be some absolute beginners that you capture something great, but for where you are, when you're there, how far away you are, there's sometimes limited availability for what you're able to do. I mean, do you have a question?
Yeah, you get 20,000 photographs. I mean, you're going through and you delete the ones that are out of focus, bad photographs, leave most of them, you actually get that 20,000 cut it down.
Sure. So I've got a little bit of a process. I can bounce the Lightroom real quick, but there's I can't hit G from here. So the way that I'll normally go through is I'll do about three or four passes as I go through, and I go like a day at a time. So my first pass is just going through anything that's completely blurry, misfire, anything completely dark, flash didn't fire, or did fire, completely washed out, absolutely nothing, just a photo of a butt, like whatever it is, like I'll just delete those outright. I don't need terabytes and terabytes of data on my computer or to back up and everything else. So I'll just do a culling of just thin in the herd. That'll usually cut about maybe 20%, maybe 25%. The next go through will be going through and identifying. What I'll do is, like for this one, for example, I kind of did a head start because I knew I took this, but I'll go through and I'll go through couple by couple and I'll flag which ones I think are the potentials. And I'm not doing any processing yet, so it's just identification. So I'll narrow it down to 3 or 4 out of 40 or 50. That'll be my second pass through. My third pass through, I'll be on, Sammy, you're right in the projector, buddy. That's all right. A beautiful silhouette. I'm going to make a t-shirt of that later. Third pass will be developing those photos, processing those photos, and then my last pass will be picking the one that I want to publish. And that's kind of just how I go through. Jerry?
20,000, how much do you end up just keeping in the archives?
I'll keep maybe 20 to 30%. What's your process like? And then we'll answer a couple questions and call it an hour.
It's slightly different. I used to do the culling of like all the garbage photos, but again, with so many photos, like that's an extra step I decided to skip. So I go straight to like picking in, just picking in. I do a pass where I pick in. I just go through everything, depending on what it is. So like at a dance event, I look at each individual photo and make like snap judgment. And there are times where I feel like I'm making too fast of judgment, but like it's a photograph. Like if it doesn't hit you, like after doing this for so many years, you kind of have an instinct for this sort of thing. But with like for something with like portraits, for example, usually I'll group them together into like a half dozen or so. I could look and compare them all, and I could say that's the one I want. Whereas in a dance event photo like this, where everything's unplanned and like some freakish thing could be flying through it in one frame that's completely missing the others. You don't want to miss that when you're just looking at a smaller thumbnail. So I look at each one, select the ones that I think are good, not great. Some are great, some, and then I'll go back and then I'll rate them. Try to find the best ones out of whatever. Again, I'll try to go for at least one per couple, or event, or like a final round. I don't like, after doing this for so many years, I have come to the realization, like, you know, even if you call it down to like 3 great photos, like people are still only going to look at the one. So I guess it's a minor tragedy where there's like a bunch of really good photos that are never going to see the light of day because they're just kind of like, they're not as good as the great photo.
Yeah, so the reason I save those other ones is if a couple approaches me and asks for some photos and you know they've got something that they might want to use for promo purposes or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's just the last thing I wanted to touch on is, I don't know how you do this, but I actually donate any proceeds that I have for photo sales to the Frankie Manning Foundation. So people ask about, you know, what are photos worth and what is my time worth, and I always have a really hard time answering that question. So generally the way that I'll do is I post it on Flickr, usually on Facebook eventually, people can tag it, I really don't care. If people want to print or a file that is worth photo quality printing quality photo, I'll charge $8 per photo and and then for personal use, and personal use only, and that goes to the Frankie Manning Foundation. And then if someone wants to use it for professional use, if they want it for their website, if they want it for flyers or promotional stuff, I'll charge $80, and I donate half of that to the Frankie Manning Foundation. It's not my primary source of income, so I kind of just picked a number and went with it. I haven't changed my policy in about probably 10 years, so maybe I should revisit it. But that's kind of how I've done it. I've done other things where people have hired me specifically for that, and I've done pay-per gig, which I'm always super uncomfortable with because not being a professional photographer, if I screw it up, that's your event, then I'm costing money. Like, weddings terrify me for the same reason. I'll never do it again. So what I've worked out with some musicians, some bands that have performed at Lincoln Center that I've done photos for, I basically said, give me a photo pass, I'll shoot what I can, and then buy them from me by photo. So instead of paying me several hundred or $1,000, it's usually only friends that I do this for. We'll work out a rate between ourselves to just be like, all right, I want 20 photos out of this batch of 100, whatever it is. And that's how I've done that. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about that. And then we are way out of time, so.
Okay, not that much. I don't do, it is kind of a pain in the butt trying to figure out, like, you know, licensing and taxes and all this fun stuff. Honestly, like, if you ask nicely, I'll just give it to you. If I don't like you, I'll charge you some random number I'm going to pull out of my butt. That's basically what
it's weird. It's hard, especially when you're not doing it for a living. I don't want to devalue what real photographers do. So we got time for like 1 or 2 questions, I think. So
I just want to make a statement, particularly for the recording. You say you're not professional photographers. You say, you know, this isn't doesn't compare to professional photographers. We've hired professional photographers for numerous Lindy Fests. Their photographs don't compare to the two of you.
Oh, thank you very
Because
much.
you know the dance, you know the people, and they literally do not compare. Y'all are both just phenomenal. Looking at this picture, how you captured the line of the body with the logo and the placement. You did the same thing with the Pamela, I think it's Pamela, right?
Yes.
Just doing the line of her body, following the logo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. That put the aerial photo one time. You picture just the lady alone, and then I do believe that was a photo when she was up in the air, of course.
Oh, I don't remember which one that was.
Not this one.
I've never seen that.
I like that one.
I like
I've never seen that photo.
This is not a vote. They're all available.
I think it's a picture.
Wow.
I think if you're
Oh.
one more down,
Shot from the back with two people there.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't want to cut into Mickey's conversation, but we can talk about it after. I'll pull it off for you. Yeah, you're welcome. And these are all online. I keep mine on Flickr. Jerry puts his on his
I think it
Facebook.
was Jerry.
Okay.
It was Jerry.
Yeah, we'll find it for you. We'll talk through it. Did we have any other? Do we have one other question? I think I saw. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you ever like work with Tino or put it out even to your personal friends to say which of these pictures should we do, or do you make the sole decision of like these are the ones we're keeping? You said 20%.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever
My girlfriend
get
hates
into a
me.
core group?
My girlfriend hates me. I ask her opinion all the time. I'm like, I've narrowed it down to these three. Which do you like?
Would you trust her? Yeah. So
Yeah, I trust her. She's got a really great eye. And I basically, when I'm working with Tina, and here, whether it's here or Lindy Fest or wherever else it is, I mean, just tell me which ones you want. And if Tina asks for, do you have any more of jam circles? Maybe I'll pull out some of the ones that I didn't publish. Or she asked the other day for, you have some of bands, and I'll pull out ones that maybe I didn't. I'll go through and pull out ones that maybe I didn't publish, and give her the opportunity to pick ones that maybe that hadn't made the cut. But at this point, I've taken photos here every year for 11 years, so like there's a library of ones that are good there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and to add to that, and to comment on what Rowena just said, is I do this for sports, but I'm not a photographer. I pick the photos that other people take. Until you just said that, I've been sitting here for as long as almost everybody here, I would have never known that you would classify yourself as not a professional photographer.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, kudos to you. I mean, your work is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
You captured it.
I don't want to speak for Jerry, but the opportunity to capture Ramona and Nala is really just they do the heavy lifting for me. So we're way over time. I do want to talk. Mickey's around here somewhere. We're going to talk to her in a minute. I want to thank you all for coming to this LED talk, talking about dance photography. I know Jerry likes to talk about photography, so I'm going to volunteer him to just grab him anytime this weekend and talk about dance photography, especially if he's got a camera up against his face. He loves to talk at that time. No, but we're around, and you can find his work on Facebook. He's Wandering and Pondering. He's also a fantastic blogger. I recommend that you follow him on Facebook. He's got some amazing photography up there, both dance photography, portraits, and everything else. And I'm Ryan Swift. You can find me on Facebook. I post, generally my stuff is on Flickr, and also on the ILHC website. So find us and find us around, and thank you very much for coming out to this talk today. Thanks. I am going to take 2 seconds to get a glass of water and catch my breath, and we're going to turn the lights up, and then we're going to have Mickey out here, and we're going to talk about Frankie and Norma. So do not go anywhere unless it's to go get your friends to come in here and tell them that Mickey's going to be talking about some office stuff. Yeah, if you need a bathroom break, you're going to do that. We'll reconvene in about 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody.